All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Today, I'm just going to give you a quick review for basic canning. Some of you all may be very skilled in canning. Some of you may be brand new. So I just want to give you the most updated information that we have and get you on the right track. Because this is so short, please contact your extension agent. Every county has an extension office, so feel free to check with your extension agents there for any information. We have a lot of written information, handouts, publications, recipes, and if you have any issues or anything like that, your extension agent may be able to help you with those. So today, I'm going to hit on the two different types of canners that process food, the two different types of food that we can can, and two different ways to pack that food. Also, a lot of people don't like canning with a pressure canner because they're scared of blow-ups. So the three major safety concerns that we have with canning are burns, blow-ups, and botulism. So we're going to hit on those as well. So your basics of safe home canning. You want to make sure that you are starting off with high quality food. The better the quality of food you start with, the better it's going to be in January and February. So high quality food. And remember to follow specific directions. Follow the recipe that you have, making sure that it is a recipe from a reputable source. Canning is about placing food in jars. We heat it to destroy the microorganisms that cause bacteria and the bacteria. If we do not kill these organisms and these bacteria, that's what turns into botulism and can be very, very fatal. So in that canning process, when we've heated our jars, the air is also driven from the jars and the seal is formed. A vacuum seal prevents the recontamination and drying out. A lot of people say, well, I don't pressure can or I don't water bath, I just leave it out on the counter. And they seal. If it's hot food, it seals, so I know it's okay. But we have found that when something seals, if it's not preserved correctly, it can seal in bacteria. So lids may pop a month or two later. Bacteria can grow on the lid of the jar. So pressure canning or water bath canning to preserve your food is the only safe way to preserve that harvest. I mentioned reputable sources. So when you're looking at your recipes or your directions, always use a USDA or Cooperative Extension Guide. Recipes from the Ball Blue Book of Canning or So Easy to Preserve or Kerr. Those are reputable. So many times we get online to pull a recipe and it is from the past or it's from just someone who decided to post a recipe and it may not be the safest way. So basic food safety, very important in canning. Wash everything. Jars can be sanitized in a dishwasher. A lot of people heat their jars in an oven, but just a tip, canning jars are made for moist heat. So when we heat them in the oven, it can cause them to crack. So you want to be careful about that. But you can use hot water or run them through a dishwasher to sanitize them. Once they're clean, I often will fill my jars with hot water and go ahead and put them in a water bath or the pressure canner just to start getting things hot. Then when I go to put the food in, I pull my jars out, I dump that water out, put the food in, and then I can stick it back into my canner, knowing that I have enough room and that the heat in the canner is already started to warm up. If you don't have enough jars and you need a space for a jar, so you want to make sure that your canner is full so that jars don't tip over during the process. Just use a jar that's empty. Go ahead and just fill it with water, stick it down in there so that it can be a space for that jar. Once upon a time, people were told to just stick a kitchen towel, a hand towel, in that spot, and it would keep the jars from falling over. And I guess it did keep the jars from falling over, but you're also putting your Tide or your Downy or whatever you're washing your towels, and little fuzzies that like to come off towels can get into your water and can cause a problem. So make sure you just use an empty spacer jar if you don't have enough food to fill your canner. So we want to sanitize everything, cutting boards, countertops, utensils we're going to be using. We want clean jars. We want clean rings, clean lids. We want to thoroughly wash all of our food, our fruits and vegetables as well. So everything must be clean. You can reuse jars and you can reuse rings, but you cannot reuse lids. So each time that you can, you need to buy new canning lids. So we have two types of canners. One is a pressure canner and one is a water bath canner. Pressure canners come with a dial gauge or a weighted gauge that is sometimes called a jiggler. And it uses heat and pressure to kill bacteria. The water bath canner does not get as hot as a pressure canner, and it doesn't provide pressure to help kill bacteria. So we use a water bath canner for our high acid foods. Our pressure canner is for low acid foods. Low acid foods need that extra heat and that extra pressure in order to kill the bacteria. So what are high acid and low acid foods? High acid foods can go in a water bath, and they are generally all of our fruits. Tomatoes are borderline because there are so many tomatoes out there, so many different varieties. We're not sure what the acidic level is in tomatoes today. So we just suggest if you put them in a water bath, that you add just a little teaspoon or a tablespoon, depending on pint or quart jar, of lemon juice, just bottled lemon juice. It does not change the flavor of your tomatoes, but does add just a little bit more acidity to bounce that pH level up a little. Also, sauerkraut and pickled products can go into a water bath. So all your fruits. So when we're thinking jams and jellies or anything with tomatoes, we can use our water bath for high acid foods. Our low acid foods are our vegetables and our meats and poultry, seafood, soups and sauces. So these are things that, because there's no acidity to help kill bacteria, we need to use the pressure canner in order to make sure that that food is safe. If we do not put our low acid foods in a pressure canner, so we fight with people daily on putting their green beans in a pressure canner because people are just scared of a pressure canner. We'll talk about that in just a second. But if you do not put those low acid foods in your pressure canner, when it starts to cool down, well, actually, when it's going through the pressure canner, that bean that's right in the middle of that quart jar, we have no idea that it's getting as the heat or the pressure that it needs if we're not putting it in a pressure canner. When that starts to cool down, we have a temperature that's in the danger zone between 40 and 140 degrees. There's moisture in the jar. There is no air in the jar, so it can have a vacuum seal, But this is, if there is bacteria in there and it's not killed, then the spores will germinate and form botulism. And no one wants to fool around with botulism. So pressure canners are only dangerous if we are not sitting beside them and not paying attention. If we are near our pressure canner and watching what's going on, they are very safe to use. So we encourage you to use that pressure canner for your low acid foods. A few important musts for canning. Again, food must be properly prepared. The way it's cut or chopped or whole will affect the process time. So follow your directions. If it says to chop something, and then make sure you chop it. If it says cut it into quarters, make sure that you're doing that. Follow that recipe. Your pressure canner, you want it to be accurate. If it is a dial gauge, the extension office can test your dial gauge. Just take your lid or your gauge in and we test those for free. So just stop by your extension office and get that tested. If it's a weighted gauge, we don't test those because they're weights, so they are accurate. Depending on your altitude and where you live in West Virginia, you may need to make altitude adjustments. So again, check with your extension agent in the area that you live. They'll be able to tell you what you need to do to change what you're doing to match the altitude where you're at. So, and again, that reputable source, make sure that you're following recipes and directions from a reputable source. Up-to-date methods and information need to be used. Beware of Granny's method. Like I said, we fight with people over green beans regularly. So we get a lot of, well, my grandma did it this way for years and nobody's dead yet. And so yes, and okay, but do you want to put your family at risk? And the way things were done 20, 30, 50 years ago, you have to think of where our world is today. We have a lot of different um, germs out there. We have a lot of different things in our atmosphere. So when it's raining, we're getting different toxins through the air. We didn't have mad cow disease and we didn't wear seatbelts and we drank out of water hoses. We didn't have hand sanitizer. Now we use hand sanitizer. So 50 years ago, 20 years ago, the world was a different place. We have to make those adjustments in order to be safe today. Your jars and your lids, you want to make sure that you're only using mason type canning jars. People will want to can in pickle jars or salsa jars, and we hear that, you know, I bought it like this, so if they can see it, if it can seal for the company, then it can seal for me. But those if we use a pickle jar or a salsa jar, those are made for commercial use. It's a very, very high risk that they will break in a pressure canner. So you want to be very careful in the jars that you are selecting, and mason type canning jars are what you should use. Sanitizing your jars. Do not use if they're nicked or they're scratched. Again, they can burst under pressure. Your two-piece canning lids and the bands can just follow the package instructions on those. Again, making sure they're clean. Your canning lids just need to be placed in some warm water so that it activates the glue that's on there. Wipe your jar rims with a damp, clean cloth, or you can use a coffee filter. So you have your jar, just cleaning the top of that to make sure that that lid is going to have a solid seal. Adjust your two-piece lids by tightening tightening your band fingertip tight. We don't want to force it and use a lot of strength to make it tight, because then air can't escape. And that's part of the canning process. We want to make sure that it's just fingertip tight. Again, we can reuse our jars and our bands, but we can never reuse lids. There are two ways to pack food in jars, hot packing and raw packing. And these are just personal preference. Mostly the hot pack is the food is cooked in the liquid before putting it in the jar. Raw pack is when you take your green beans, you just put them in there raw and then add boiling hot water to the jars. It really is your recipe is going to tell you if you should hot pack or raw pack. It will give you directions on the pressure, the poundage, and the time that you need to process those foods. If it says either one or gives you either option, then it is your choice. Headspace is very important. So you want to make sure that you're using the correct headspace. You can see in this picture right up at the top, there's a green little ruler. If you buy one of the toolkits, usually there's one of those in there that will help you to measure. But you can also see the rings on the jar in that picture, and it shows you where food should be. So make sure that you are correct on your headspace. Too little headspace, foods may bubble out during the processing and deposit on the rim and it won't seal. Too much headspace, food at the top is likely to discolor. The jar may not seal properly because not all of the air will be forced out of the jar during processing. So for food safety, follow that recipe. Each food has its own processing time. Time differs with jar size and the way that food is cut, and too little processing time can equal spoilage. When we store our canned foods, we don't want to lay them on their side, so don't tip them over. Check the lids for proper seal. Store in a dark, dry area, and the quality of canned food is good for 1 year. Food safety, people eat food that's been canned 5, 6 years, as long as it has not come unsealed. If the lid hasn't popped and there's no bacteria when you take the lid off, it could be safe, but the quality of the food starts to deteriorate after 1 year. So with your pressure canner, and why people have some blow-ups at times is because they don't watch their dial gauges. You run downstairs to put your laundry in, and then your neighbor yells at you or the phone rings, and you forget that you have an oven on or your stovetop on, and this continues to build pressure. So if you're not there watching it, then it can get too high of pressure, and that's what causes our pressure canners to have blowups. Also, if it would lose pressure during the processing time, you need to stop processing and start over as it gets back up to that 11 pounds, if that's what you're canning at. So just pull up a chair and set with that pressure canner. All right, so that is about 20 minutes. It was very quick. There's a lot to canning, a whole lot to canning and preserving, and you want to do it right. If you're investing the time and the money into canning, you want the best of your harvest. So please reach out to your extension office, your local extension office. You're welcome to email me. My email is on the screen. We will send you any information that you may want and try to answer any questions that you may have. So thank you very much. Your word of the day is preserve. So Keely, are you with us? Do you want to explain that part?
Yeah, so thank you so much, Andi. That was very helpful. I think, I definitely have a little more confidence in myself for canning than I did before. So I really appreciate that. The link to take the survey and earn some points for your county is in the comments. So if you take that and use the code word preserve, you'll earn 10 points. So go ahead and do that. And then I also wanted to say that we won't be on next week, but the week after that, we will be talking about gardening through a heat wave, which is something that we've had a lot of people interested in and asking questions about how to keep their plants alive with all of the crazy heat that's happened this summer. So that's my update. And does anybody have any questions for Andi? Mary did comment and wanted to let everyone know to be careful with old mayo jars. She was reiterating what you said, Andi, that they are not designed for pressure canning. So thank you, Mary, for that as well. All right. Well, it looks like we have a quiet group today, but if anyone does end up with any questions, I will be posting the recording of this on social media. You can find it. It may be a little bit, but once I post it, it'll be on YouTube, Facebook, and you'll be able to take the survey. And if you have any questions there, you can comment, and I will do my best to answer them, or I may reach out to Andi if I need some help answering those. So feel free to ask those after the fact if you'd like. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Bye bye. Thanks, Andi.
Bye.